I've been a truck driver for nearly 15 years. The road is my home now, more so than any city or town I've ever stayed in. I've hauled freight for various companies across the country, driving through every state, from the bustling cities to the desolate stretches of desert. Most of the time it's a lonely life, but it's one I've gotten used to. The isolation becomes a part of you, the miles, the quiet, the rumble of the engine. It's all routine, but sometimes the routine breaks and things get strange. It was late one winter night, around 2 a.m, when I first started to feel it, the weirdness in the air. I'd just crossed into New Mexico after a long haul from Texas. My truck, a 2015 Freightliner, had been purring along just fine, the headlights cutting through the pitch-black night as I made my way down Route 40. The truck's air conditioning hummed steadily, and the radio played softly in the background, a mix of talk shows and classic rock. It was cold outside, too cold for comfort, but inside the cab it was warm, and the heater kept the chill at bay. The road was long and straight, stretching for miles with nothing but the occasional roadside sign marking the distance. The monotonous blackness of the desert enveloped me, and for the most part it was peaceful. I'd driven this route dozens of times before, but tonight there was something different about it. The silence felt heavier. The air, though dry, had a strange metallic scent to it. I shook it off as just fatigue. After all, I'd been driving for nearly 12 hours, and my eyes were starting to feel the strain. That's when I saw the car. At first I thought I was seeing things. A car, an old rusted Chevy, was parked on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere. The only light came from the faint glow of my truck's headlights, and I could just barely make out the figure of a man standing next to it. He was just standing there, motionless, like he was waiting for something, maybe a tow truck, maybe just taking a break. I slowed down, keeping an eye on him, just in case. But as I passed, I felt my pulse spike. The man wasn't looking at the car. He wasn't looking anywhere, in fact. His face was completely blank, staring straight ahead as if he had no idea I was even there. I should have just kept going, I know that now, but something about it made me stop. I don't know if it was the eerie stillness or the fact that there was no other sign of life for miles around. I pulled over, thinking I could at least offer help. As I stepped out of the truck, the cold air hit me like a slap to the face. The desert night was alive with the sounds of distant animals, foxes, coyotes, maybe even an owl or two, but that was all, nothing else. I called out to the man, my voice swallowed by the vastness of the desert. "Hey, you need some help?" At first there was no response. I took a step forward, cautious but willing to assist. The figure didn't move, not even a twitch. I took another step, and that's when I realized something wasn't right. And the man's clothes were torn, filthy, and his posture was off. It wasn't like he was just waiting for help. He looked out of place, as though he didn't belong here at all. I noticed his shoes, ragged and worn, the soles flapping as if he had walked for miles in them. His hair was matted, his skin pale. But what truly unnerved me was his eyes. They were wide open, unblinking, staring straight ahead, not a sign of recognition or awareness in them, just blank. I called out to him again, this time louder, but still no response. I stepped closer than I should have, but I couldn't help it. Something about him, it was like I was drawn to him. "Are you okay?" I asked, but just as I spoke, the man's head slowly tilted to the side. For a second I froze. There was something almost unnatural about the way he moved. It wasn't jerky, not like a person would if they were stiff. It was more fluid, too fluid. Before I could process it, he started moving, fast, too fast for a man in his condition. He didn't run, but it was like he glided toward me, his body contorting in ways that seemed wrong. Unnatural. I turned on my heel and sprinted back to the truck. I didn't look back. I didn't want to. The man's eyes, still wide open, burned in my mind as I threw myself into the cab, slamming the door shut. My hands were shaking as I started the engine and floored it. I didn't know what the hell I had just seen, but I wasn't about to find out. I didn't stop driving for the rest of the night. Every time I thought I saw a light or a figure on the side of the road, my heart would race. But every time, there was nothing, no one. Eventually I made it to a truck stop in Flagstaff, Arizona. I parked, exhausted and still rattled by the events of the night. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just a man who was in some sort of trouble. Maybe a hitchhiker, maybe someone who had been stranded for too long. But I couldn't ignore that feeling, that nagging sense that something had been wrong, something I couldn't explain. I went inside the diner to grab a coffee and maybe distract myself. It was early morning and the place was mostly empty, save for a few long-haul drivers and truckers grabbing breakfast. I slid into a booth by the window, trying to relax, but the unease stayed with me. That's when I overheard the conversation at the next table. A trucker was talking about an incident from just a few nights ago. A man, he said, had been spotted walking along the highway near Route 40. He was dressed in rags, eyes wide open, just like I remembered. The trucker didn't stop, but another driver did. And that driver was never seen again. My blood ran cold. I couldn't shake the feeling that the man I saw wasn't a random hitchhiker or someone stranded. He was something else, something more. I didn't want to dwell on it, but I couldn't let it go either. A few weeks later, I was back on the same stretch of highway. It was the same route I'd taken that night, the same stretch of desert. But now every shadow in my peripheral vision made me tense up. Every rustle of wind, every flicker of movement in the distance made me second-guess myself. It happened again. This time I didn't stop. I couldn't. I saw him again, standing by the side of the road, just like before. But this time I could swear I saw a slight grin on his face. His eyes never blinked. He didn't even move, just stood there, staring as my truck passed by. I tried to shake the thought from my mind, but deep down I knew what it meant. The man, or whatever he was, wasn't just a hitchhiker. He wasn't just some lost soul. He was something that followed you, something that knew your every move, no matter how fast you tried to get away. I finished my delivery that night, and I never went back down that stretch of road again. But I'll always remember the way those wide, blank eyes stared at me, and sometimes when I'm driving alone in the dark, I wonder if he's still out there, watching, waiting.